They say he's just not ready. They say he's afraid, guarded, confused, that he needs time, space, healing. So you wait. You soften. You give him more understanding than you ever gave yourself. But what no one tells you is this: some men cannot love deeply, not because they're evil, but because something inside them has frozen. And you, with all your empathy and longing, cannot melt what refuses to be touched. This is not a story of blame. This is a story of awakening. Asterisk 1. He was never taught what love feels like. Easy to assume he doesn't care. That his silence means rejection, that his distance means disinterest. But what if he simply doesn't know what love actually feels like? Not because he's incapable, but because no one ever showed him. He was taught to perform, not to feel, to fix, not to listen, to conquer, not to connect. He learned early that feelings were inconvenient, that affection could be withdrawn, that to be strong meant to be self-contained, unshakable, untouchable. So he built a fortress, not of cruelty, but of survival. And by the time you came along, offering something raw, sacred, real, he didn't know what to do with it. You weren't too much. You were just speaking a language he was never taught to understand, because love to him wasn't warmth. It was a transaction, a role to fulfill, a mask to wear. And when you offered depth instead of performance, soul instead of seduction, he froze. He didn't reject you. He rejected the part of himself that never learned to stay open. And that's the tragedy. You gave him a door back to himself, but he was too afraid to walk through it. Asterisk 2. He mistakes intensity for intimacy. He pulls you in, hard and fast. There's a spark, a charge, a hunger in the way he looks at you, like he's been starving for your presence his whole life. It feels magical, even faded. You start to believe you've found something rare, something deep, but intensity isn't intimacy. It's urgency. It's adrenaline. It's the high of escaping one's own emptiness through another's light. Man who cannot love deeply doesn't know how to sit in quiet closeness. He doesn't know how to stay when things get still. Real love requires presence, and presence demands slowness. But for him, slowness feels like suffocation. So he creates chaos. He loves bombs, then withdraws. He shares vulnerable moments, then disappears for days. He keeps you on edge, wondering what went wrong, what you did, how to get him back. That confusion? It's mistaken for depth, because the nervous system, when trained in trauma, reads instability as passion. But passion without grounding is not love. It's a trauma reenactment in disguise. He doesn't crave connection. He craves a rush. And when the high fades, so does he. Not because you weren't enough, but because he doesn't know how to. Feel safe inside something real. Asterisk 3. He feels safer when you need him, not when you love him. He shows up when you're in pain, when you're uncertain, anxious, in pieces. In those moments, he feels powerful, useful, necessary. But the moment you soften into safety, the moment you stop needing and start loving, he withdraws. Because for a man who cannot love deeply, being needed feels safer than being loved. When you need him, he has a role, a script, a function. But when you love him from your wholeness, without clinging, without performance, he doesn't know who he is. Being loved requires presence. It requires him to show up emotionally, not just perform support. And that kind of vulnerability triggers his deepest fear, that he is not enough as he is. So he thrives when you're uncertain. He feels close when you're aching. But when your heart begins to open with steady, grounded affection, he disconnects. Not because your love is too much, but because it demands a kind of selfhood he hasn't yet built inside himself. Think your healing is pushing him away. But the truth is, Your healing reveals the depth he cannot meet. And so the more you become whole, the more he starts to fade. ***** 4. He projects his unworthiness onto you. There's a moment, subtle, but seismic, when he starts to look at you differently. Not with awe, but suspicion. Not with tenderness, but tension. You haven't changed, but something inside him has been activated. A man who cannot love deeply often carries an invisible wound. The belief that he is not worthy of being truly loved. And when someone comes along who sees him, values him, cherishes him, it doesn't feel safe. It feels threatening. He doesn't trust your eyes. He thinks, she must be wrong. If she truly knew me, she'd leave. And so, he pushes you away before you have the chance. But here's the part that breaks you. He doesn't just leave. He turns you into the problem. He finds flaws, picks fights, pulls away. He'll say you're too emotional, too intense, or he'll become distant, then blame your need for closeness. This is not because you are wrong. It's because your love confronted the lie he lives inside. I am not worthy of being held in my full humanity. He cannot yet receive what he deeply longs for, and so he punishes you for offering it. You didn't fail to love him. He failed to believe he deserved to be loved. ***5. He seeks control, not connection at first. He seems composed, grounded, independent. He may even speak in the language of awareness, saying all the right things about space, boundaries, growth. But look deeper, and you'll find this truth. He doesn't open. He manages. He doesn't connect. He calculates. For a man who cannot love deeply, vulnerability feels like danger. Not because of who you are, but because of what love once cost him. So instead of surrendering, he strategizes. Instead of leaning in, he intellectualizes. He wants connection on his terms. He wants closeness he can control, affection that doesn't require his heart. And the moment you move beyond his framework, the wall rises. He'll say you're moving too fast. He'll say you're pressuring him. But what's really happening is this: you're touching the place where his control ends and his unprocessed pain begins. He doesn't want to meet you in the unknown. He wants to preserve the illusion that he's safe, even if it means losing the possibility of real love. So he keeps the door open just enough, but never wide enough for you to fully enter. Not because he doesn't want intimacy, but because connection requires surrender. And he's still holding the reins of a self he never learned to trust. ***6. He's addicted to distance you. Feel it in the space between texts. In the way he pulls you close with one word, then disappears. For 3 days without explanation. And just when you begin to let go, he returns. With softness, with presence, with just enough to reopen the 8. This is not inconsistency. This is addiction. Not to you, but to distance itself. A man who cannot love deeply often confuses longing with love. He feels most alive in the pursuit, in the not quite, in the almost. Why? Because closeness is foreign. It demands that he feel fully. It asks him to stay present in a body that's learned to flee. So he remains just far enough to crave you, far enough to protect himself, far enough to keep his emotional world untouched. And the cruelest part? He will blame you for wanting more. He'll say you're too needy, too expectant, too sensitive. But you are not asking for too much. You are simply asking for what love actually is. And he, though he may ache for it, is still more loyal to his distance than to his own heart. 7. He doesn't see you. He sees a role you thought he saw you. The way your eyes darken when you're lost in thought, the quiet strength behind your softness, the depth in your silence. You thought he felt the full spectrum of your presence. But a man who cannot love deeply does not see women as they are. He sees them as symbols, roles, reflections of what he needs, not what you carry. To him, you are the caretaker, the dream, the nurturer, the muse. Until you become inconvenient, until your truth contradicts his fantasy. He loves you when you smile, but withdraws when you ask. He cherishes your beauty, but avoids your boundaries. He adores your sensuality, but retreats from your sorrow, because you are not a person in his eyes. You are a role to fulfill a story he never questioned. And the moment you step out of that story, when you ask to be met, not managed, he feels threatened. He pulls away, not because you've changed, but because you dared to become real. And real love requires two whole humans. Not a performance, not a pedestal, not a projection. You were never too much. You were just not willing to stay invisible anymore. *8. He thinks love means losing himself when you reach for him with presence, not pressure. When you offer softness, safety, stillness, he doesn't lean in. He pulls away, not because your love is too much, but because to him, love feels like erasure. A man who cannot love deeply often carries this unconscious belief: if I let someone in, I will disappear. Because somewhere in his history, in his childhood, in his early heartbreaks, closeness meant control. Affection came with expectations. Connection came with self-sacrifice. So now, even the most sacred kind of intimacy feels like a threat. The moment you get too close, he feels the edges of his identity dissolve. He doesn't know where he ends and you begin. And because he's never built a self rooted in wholeness, he fears that love will swallow him. He thinks, if I let her see me, she will own me. If I commit, I will lose myself. But the tragedy is this: true love doesn't erase. It reveals. It amplifies your essence. It doesn't consume it. Still, until he understands that, your tenderness will feel like pressure, and your truth will feel like a trap. And you'll keep wondering what you did wrong, when all you did was offer real connection to someone who has only known love as survival. *9. He's drawn to women who don't challenge his depth. You wonder why he gave so much to her. The one who didn't feel deeply, who didn't ask for more, who didn't challenge his silences or hold up the mirror of truth. It stings. Because you know you offered him something sacred, and he seemed to run from it. But here's the truth most don't say aloud. A man who cannot love deeply is magnetized by safety, not in intimacy, but in emotional distance. He chooses women who won't ask him to descend, who won't reflect his numbness, who let him stay in the shallow waters where he can play the part of the good man without ever touching his own soul. Because you feel too much. You ask the real questions. You love in ways that expose everything he's buried. You threaten the walls he's worked his whole life to keep intact. Not with aggression, but with presence. And for someone who isn't ready, presence is terrifying. So he calls you intense, too emotional, overwhelming. But what he's really saying is, you make me feel things I'm not ready to face. He doesn't choose her because she's better. He chooses her because he can hide with her and still call it love. But you were never meant to be a hiding place. You were meant to be a home for someone who can truly enter. *10. He can't love you deeply. Until he meets himself, you tried everything. You were patient. You made excuses. You softened your voice. You silenced your needs. You waited for him to heal, to open, to see you. But here's the truth no one wants to accept. You cannot love a man into his own transformation. You can't bleed for both hearts. You can't carry him across a threshold his soul is not willing to walk. No matter how intuitive you are, no matter how much potential you see, no matter how powerful your love is, Because deep love, real, soul-rooted love, only becomes possible when a man has met himself first, when he has sat with his own silence, faced his own shame, grieved the boy inside him who never felt held, and chosen, fully and willingly, to become whole. Until then, your love will be medicine he spits out, not because it's bitter, but because it's too pure for a system. Still addicted to pain, he will reject your depth until he makes peace with his own. And so, the most sacred thing you can do is stop trying to be his path. Let him find his own fire. Let him meet his own mirror. Let him lose what he didn't know how to hold. Because when you stop saving him, you finally saved yourself. The return to yourself. You wanted it to work. Not just with him, but with the story you built around love. The one where if you were kind enough, soft enough, loyal enough, he would awaken. But sometimes, love isn't a beginning. Sometimes it's a threshold, a fire that burns down every illusion you clung to, just so you could finally see the woman you abandoned to keep him close. He couldn't love you deeply, not because you weren't lovable, but because he hadn't yet met the depths within himself. And so the lesson was never about how to win him. It was about how to stop losing yourself. Because there is a version of you that emerges only after you let go of what was never real. She doesn't chase. She doesn't beg. She doesn't shrink. She walks barefoot through her own silence and finds God in the parts of her that no one else could hold. This isn't a story about heartbreak. This is a story about homecoming. Not to him, to you. If these words touched something in you, not just your thoughts, but that secret ache behind your ribs, then you already know you're not alone. You're not the only woman who gave everything and got silence in return, who kept believing his wounds were your mission, who thought that if you just loved him the right way, he would finally stay. But now, you see differently. This wasn't your failure. This was your initiation. So I invite you gently, deeply, share your story in the comments, not for attention, but for liberation. Because when you speak your truth, you become the mirror another woman is still too afraid to face. And if this video felt like home, if it mirrored the journey of your heart, subscribe. Not because you need more content, but because this is not just a channel. It's a sacred space for remembrance, a refuge for women who feel deeply, love wildly, and rise from their own ashes. You belong here. You always have. Welcome home. Asterisk. If you're still here, you're not just watching, you're remembering. Because something in this video wasn't new to you. It was familiar. Not because it's easy, but because your soul has lived it. You stayed until the end because you're not afraid of the truth anymore. Because you're done pretending. Because a quiet voice inside you whispered, This was for me. So hear this. You are not crazy. You are not dramatic. You are not too much. You are a woman waking up, shedding the illusions you were taught to chase, reclaiming your voice, rebuilding your worth from ashes no one else could see. There is no shame in loving deeply, only power in choosing not to do it from self-abandonment again. And because you stayed, this space is now yours, not just as a viewer, but as a witness, as a sister, as a soul brave enough to look at her own pain and say, I will rise from this. Until next time, stay soft, stay sovereign, and above all, stay with yourself.